So thank you very much for having me here at Ideas on Tap Vendasta. This isn't the first time I've spoken here, but I, for some reason, am like quite nervous about it because I think I'm talking about stuff that I've been researching on for the past 2.5, 3 years. And this is stuff that we use for programming at the Wilson Center. So lots of times I'm kind of like, you're going to be talking to people about what you've been doing and what you wrote and what you present. And what if they realize it's all bullshit, you know? So I'm a little bit nervous for that, but I'm a talker. I'll warm up. I had a wine beforehand, so I'm feeling pretty good right now. Anyway, don't need to give myself much more of an introduction, thanks to Jeff. Yeah, I'm the director of the Wilson Center, and I have 2 degrees from the University of Saskatchewan, and I also teach entrepreneurship. My world is 100% entrepreneurship. So just give you a really quick background on what is the Wilson Center. It's a hub of entrepreneurial activity at the University of Saskatchewan. We do things like workshops and startup projects. We just wrapped up Pitch Party. Funny enough, I got sick the day after Pitch Party. We had an attendance of over 800 people, and somehow I managed to get sick afterwards, so I was pretty happy about that. We have our i3 Idea Challenge coming up. We also do lab sessions, and we do something new called user experience design thinking. So we put on programs for that. Does anybody here know what design thinking means when I'm using that term? Okay, we've got a few of my friends, because they hear me say it all the time. So yeah, thanks, girls. So a few people here, but I'm going to talk through it. So I just wanted to see if anybody actually knew what design thinking was. Other things that Wilson Center does is we encourage everyone to be creative and engage with creative thinking. We use our own tools to help you get focused on ideas. We built an idea lab that is housed at Innovation Place. We used to be located on the main campus in Edward School of Business in 252 square feet of space. And then we moved over to 4,200 square feet of space in Innovation Place. We love it. We have really good parking, so that helps. I used to have to walk 12 minutes to my parking spot. But more than that, we're able to actually put on the programs that we want to do. So somebody once described our office as an adult preschool, and I was like, that's awesome. I love it. So it's very colorful. We try to make sure every surface is writable. Chalkboards, whiteboard walls, whiteboard tables, prototyping closets. There's stuff all over the place. Sometimes there's kids running through, but I'll talk more about that later as well. But what I really want to talk about today is design thinking and how you can utilize it in idea building, which is really ultimately the kind of programming that we do. So this is my official definition for design thinking, which is a formal method of practical creative resolution of problems or issues with the intent of improved future results. I would never be able to memorize that. So I thought I'd put it up so it looks quite impressive, but this is actually a very formal term of what human-centered design thinking is. To us, what it actually means is the methodology of actualizing your concepts and ideas, and is a way for us to focus on the human side of design. So design thinking has a bunch of different components. And a bunch of different people utilize design thinking as well. In our center, in terms of the methodology we use for our design thinking, it's very much focusing on the anthropological, the psychology, and the human side of it. So we really dive into human behavior patterns, human functionality, human routine as well. Why do we design what we do it? To focus primarily on the end user. Again, it's called human-centered design. So first and foremost is the end user. The end user is always number one with it. It's to understand and be able to predict human reaction. Try doing that. But that's what we do in human-centered design thinking. We want to actually ensure that we're solving actual problems. We get a lot of people coming into our office who are like, we had this really great idea. So we're like, okay, awesome. Tell us about the idea. And I can tell you stories about some of the ideas. But one of the first questions that always comes out from us is, okay, that's great, but what problem are you actually solving? And people will tell us, I'm like, well, that's actually not a problem. No one actually really cares about that. You actually created the problem, and now you created a solution. So that means that you have extra work to do with your job. You have to convince someone they have a problem, and then you have to convince them that you have the solution. So human-centered design thinking is designed so that you are actually going like, hey, don't you have this problem day to day? And people are sort of realizing it and going like, yeah, actually, you're right. Like, great, I have a product that's going to be able to solve that for you. We also do it to develop a number of feasible proactive solutions and watch things to come to life. So other reasons why we love, or what are other reasons for definitions of design thinking are we get to observe what we love, we get to observe people, we get to imagine things, we can make things, and we can learn how to improve stuff as well. And so there's a couple, design thinking allows you to be creative and sharpen your problem solving skills. So a lot of people will come and talk about design thinking as if it's just for entrepreneurship. We actually don't just focus on design thinking for entrepreneurs. We actually do it a lot as a strategic process of thinking as well. We apply it to almost every single one of our own initiatives, just to make sure we're asking our end users, are you actually going to be using this? Because that's 100% the most important thing. So a couple elements of design thinking. One of the most important things that you can really touch on in design thinking is empathy. In order to be a really good design thinker, you are an empathetic thinker. So that's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. So ask yourself, how often do you actually do that? Because human beings, I don't know if you guys knew this, but human beings as a whole are naturally incredibly selfish people. We like to think about ourselves, and we like to always put ourselves first. It's just our natural reaction. That's how we are. So when we teach human-centered design thinking, what we're doing is telling you that you are actually the least important person in this equation. So empathy, we reteach people how to be empathetic. Second thing we do is something called creative sensibility, and that's the ability to be able to think outside of the box, but still also be able to focus on what you're actually doing. And so being able to do that, being able to push your limits, being able to have someone like really force you to think in a way that you're not used to, but still remain focused is extremely difficult to do. So creative sensibility is something else we really touch on. So for us, we call it user-based idea building, human-centered design thinking. It's all the same thing. It's basically finding innovation opportunities by observing human behavior patterns. So I'm going to go through the 5 stages of what human-centered design thinking is, and then I'm going to give you some takeaways, and I have a quick little activity I want you to do just to know some of the prep that we go through. I really wanted to do a gigantic human-centered design thinking activity and then realize that it's impossible. Pretty much everything we do takes about 60 minutes at least, and even that's pushing it, so I'm just going to show you a few snippets and some takeaways you can take away from design thinking. So the first stage of our user-based idea building or design thinking process is called Discover. So in Discover, what we really do is we zone in and focus on things that humans really think about, they feel, and they value. Some of the objectives of stage 1 is to be able to understand people with a very unbiased view, is to be able to enhance our senses. That's one of the key things about human-centered design thinking, is that you need to be thinking in a very heightened experience at all times. So oftentimes what I do, we use the airport for a number of different scenarios, but picture this, right? Everyone, let's think about yourself at local Saskatoon Airport. When you're at the local Saskatoon Airport, how do you feel? Annoyed? Sometimes excited, sometimes happy because you're leaving, but think about going through the motions of being at Saskatoon Airport. Rushed. How do you find the airport? Tired. Yeah, we do. They've made some changes, but okay, now think about yourself at a brand new airport, whether it's an international airport or whether it's, just a brand new airport. How do you feel when you land somewhere new? It's not Saskatoon, so I'm going to say you're going to feel excited. Panicked, okay. What else? Somebody else who feels happy when they're away. Yeah, so basically when you compare the two different feelings, when people talk about being at a local airport, they use words like bored, you just kind of go through you feel a little bit mundane, you go through the steps. It's just very, very, there's not a lot of thought put into it. That's one method. The other method is when you're at a new airport, you feel excited, you feel like you kind of observe everything, you see everything, you feel energetic. That's what we call heightening your senses. And so in human-centered design thinking, we ask you to have your senses heightened all the time. When you are engaging in the discover stage, when you're watching people, when you're talking to people, we want you to constantly have your senses heightened. A few other things we do is we start to recognize common human patterns. We want to continually ignite our curiosity, which is why we keep asking why. And then we also learn a new method of documenting. So I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Stage 2 is called reflect. And this is when we take all of our observations, because like I said, we take field trips out to gas stations, to grocery stores, to airports, to the mall, and we watch people, to the food court, and we basically sit there and we document notes. What do you do with those notes afterwards? Well, we teach you a method of how to organize it. We get you focused so that you have a coherent vision, and you have clarity in your observations, and all of a sudden you're starting to notice things. You're starting to notice common patterns. And at the end of it, what you do is you develop a strong point of view, your point of view. You're digging deeper into understanding people, which is a big objective of stage 2, but you're also becoming an engaged communicator, you're becoming organized and focused, and you're also starting to really, really hone in on what your point of view statement is. Point of view statement can also be translated into a problem statement. The two and two are part and parcel, but whatever you decide to call it, you're getting more focused about what you're actually solving. And that leads you to stage 3, which is identify. And this one, we focus on idea generation and how to come up with a clear and focused solution. So in this one, what we do when we do brainstorming, identify, brainstorming, that's the same thing. We really push the boundaries of brainstorm. So most people assume that when you brainstorm, you come up with an idea and then you come up with a solution. In our world of brainstorming, we never do that. We make sure you come up with 20, 30, 40 different ideas that are very unique. None of them are similar to each other, and we don't let you rationalize it. You are not allowed to think about if this works or not. People have come up with time machines and thunderbolts and candy poles. Don't ask what that was for, but a lot of different things. But we really focus on pushing the boundaries and making sure you're very creative. And that leads us to stage 4, which is create. And this is where we actually prototype. So now you want to bring whatever you created to life. And in this one, our objectives are things like making sure we create something experiential and interactive that you can actually put in your user's hands. Because how is it going to be beneficial to you to understand your product if you just give someone a piece of paper that outlines in 5 bullet points exactly what your idea is? You're not actually watching people use it. And it doesn't matter if your prototype is a low fidelity or a high fidelity, so crappy or super good prototype, you still want to get it into your user's hands. And then ultimately that leads us to our last stage, which is called testing. And this is the most important stage because this is when we can figure out how people are interacting with your idea. We understand what is or isn't working, and then we get some feedback on how to improve it. So it's an iterative process too, and I know that you guys do things at Vendasta and probably in some of your other workplaces that are very similar to this. This is our process. So it's an iterative process. We continue to go through these 5 cycles over and over again until we do finally come up with a good product. Most people will go through this and they assume that you only need to go through it once, and they'll do one prototype. And as soon as they do that, they're like, well, we did one prototype, it's good enough. And I always bring up the Dyson vacuum, which I'm probably never going to be able to use again. I know some of my former students are here, but I always use this as an example. How many prototypes of the Dyson vacuum were actually made before it actually became the Dyson vacuum? Any guesses? Over 1,000. Yes, definitely over 1,000. Anybody know the number? I think it's 5,170. 5,170 prototypes over 15 years. A couple near bankruptcies before he came up with the final prototype. So the first one is never the right one. So some takeaways from design thinking that you can maybe apply to yours is, takeaway number 1 is we see the world through our user's eyes. Everything we do is about your end user. Does this place look familiar to anyone? Yeah, it's the Saskatoon Airport. When we're at the Saskatoon Airport, again, our senses are enhanced and we're starting to observe things. So we want to be able to actually be in our user's shoes. So we ask questions like, have you ever stopped to watch someone else at the airport? How do they act? How do they behave? How do they sit? What are they working on? Why are they talking that loud? We write down these questions and then we write down answers. Sometimes we go and engage with the person. Sometimes we just sit back and we draw them. Sometimes we take pictures of it. Sometimes people get in shit for it. Sometimes they don't. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that we're really trying to make sure that we are sitting in our user's shoes. Takeaway number 2 is that everyone has a story. And that's one of the most interesting things about human-centered design thinking is being able to get out there and talk to people. Does this scene look familiar to anyone? Taste of Saskatchewan, right. I was working with an entrepreneur who needed to really pivot on her particular idea. And the two of us actually spent about 4 hours at the Taste of Saskatchewan interviewing people. We recorded them, we videotaped them, we took notes, we drew pictures of them. You just can't stop. This is where you're going to get the most insight. This is where you're really going to be able to dig deeper and find out things and ensure that your point of view, whatever you came up with, is accurate and its focus. Is the more you get to learn about your user, the better you're going to be. So everyone has a story, and be sure to go out and ask. Number 3 is design for one can be designed for all. This is the Three Musketeers. It has nothing to do with design, but that's all I could think of. Every human is different. Everybody has a different personality. But needs are universal and solutions are relatable. So when we are doing this, we look for patterns in human behavior because there is always pattern in every human behavior. And that's how you design something that's going to be ready for the mass public. That's when people realize, oh, this is amazing. I also want to buy this product. So designing for one can really mean you're designing for all, as long as you're catching and making sure that it's following some type of human need or human pattern, because those are all the same, no matter who you are. Build then think. I love this one as a lesson to take away, because I'm a talker. I'm a doer then think. Act first, apologize later, say something first, think about it later, build then think. So in the world of design thinking, and I know that a couple other people mentioned it, we want to be fast. So lots of times you'll spend a lot of times like planning out what you're going to do, making sure it's perfect, making sure it's accurate. In the world of design thinking, we don't. We talk about failing quickly and failing often, because that's how you're going to learn. Get it out there, try it out. Instead of thinking about it, the possibilities of whether it's going to work or not, build, then think about it later. So this is just a sample of some of the kids that have come into our center who are building things. And they come up with about 4 or 5 prototypes in 20 minutes. And it's great. We love working with kids. They are far more open-minded than adults are. And my last takeaway is building on ideas. So the best way to be able to be a good design thinker and to really focus is to build on someone else's ideas. And that takes a lot of a push to really be able to do that. So as a quick little exercise, this is one of the things that we prepped and do in order to get ready to do some brainstorming and think outside the box. So I'm just going to get you guys to shout out the answers, but take a look at this cup. Let's list 30 different ways that we can relate to this cup. You as a human being to this cup. How many ways can we relate to this cup? I'll get you started. The cup is round and my eyes are round. That's one. You're white, yeah. I don't get to use that one, so that doesn't work for me, yeah. You both hold liquids, that's right. But eventually, you can separate that. You hold liquids, but you also extract liquids as well. So let's put that into 4. What other things? You have a hand, we have handles. So does the cup, right. We're only at like 6. What? Yeah, if you drop off the Empire State Building, you will break, as will the cup. We're half full, yeah, okay. Or, alternatively, you're both half empty. So you're up to about 8 or 9. Usually we give people a time to do this, about 60 seconds. Sometimes we give them a little bit more time. But again, it's about being quick thinking and not thinking like, I don't know, how do I relate to this cup? And it works. And once you practice, the more you practice it, the more you think about it, the more you can take away, the easier it comes to you. So 30 different ways to relate to a cup sounds intense, but actually it's pretty low. Sometimes we'll go up to 50. If we're with a group that's been working on this for a while, we'll go up to like 100 different ways to relate to a cup, or a pencil, or a chair, or a table, whatever. Again, just to get your brain thinking into like expanding your ideas and not rationalizing stuff. That's a big thing with human-centered design thinking, is we don't rationalize, at least in our methods. In the world of like understanding the humans, we don't rationalize just yet. We'll figure it out afterwards. So a couple other things, and I'm going to be wrapping up pretty quick. We have Focus Labs that is a preview of what we do, and time for you to come into our space and work with us. And it's every Tuesday and Thursday from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. It's free. We're located at Innovation Place. Our space is awesome. Food's really good at Innovation Place too. And in the summer, you can head out to Boffin's Patio, which is the best patio in the city. This is what our Idea Lab looks like on the inside when we have people inside. And that's pretty much it for me for today. So, any questions?